Hello and happy Sunday to you. It's Sarah from Funky Fossil here. I'm back with our Make It Sunday inspiration. It's a weekly video that we do on YouTube, giving you some ideas for playing with your stash, getting creative, and hopefully getting out any of those Funky Fossil products that you already have, you haven't been making enough use of, or just playing with anything that you already have. So this week I wanted to do some more work in my A5 journal and wanted to play with collage this week, because as we've been going through in the last few weeks, I've been obviously using papers and stencils and stamps as I would typically do when I'm making, but recently I've just fallen back in love with the whole idea of layering and pulling together elements onto your page that you either have created because you've made that background, or is helping you to use up scraps and bits of paper that you otherwise aren't sure what you're going to have a use for. So I'm going to do some collaging in my journal, and it'll be fairly basic, but I did want to give you a little bit of an overview before we get started of some of the supplies that I typically use when I'm thinking about pulling together some kind of collaged backgrounds. So as I say, my A5 journals here, I have already, and I don't know if you can see, it's kind of almost slightly discoloured on the paper. I have given it a kind of a very rough coating of gesso. I don't think I'm going to need it, but sometimes if you're in doubt in your journal and you're thinking you might be wanting to use different mediums, it can be a good idea to have some pages already gessoed. Obviously the brush I used when I was gessoing was probably not the cleanest, so it's already got a little bit of different colours down there. I'm planning to cover most of this up, but I just know that I've got something here now on that base that will take kind of water reactive mediums or other things that I might want to use without having to think about how the paper will respond. So that's my journal ready to go. I say if your kind of preference is to work mainly with kind of papers over the top of your substrate, then you're not really going to need to gesso the base layer. It's just a precautionary step that I've taken this week. So I've got a whole heap of things in front of me here. I'm not proposing that I'm going to use all of them in today's make, but this is the kind of stuff that I would typically gather together when I'm wanting to kind of sit down and have a session making collages. And so let me just quickly run you through them. I typically will want to do some stenciling at some point on my background. I'm not sure on what layer that stenciling will happen, but I often do want to add a bit of stenciling to that to add some interest. This is our coded stencil, and this stencil and our A5 Musings stamp set will be the Makers bundle that's on offer in the shop this week, 20% discount on them together, because these are probably two of the stencils and stamps that I will go to most often, just to add a little bit of background interest to whatever I'm building up, because they're not necessarily looking to be the focal point, but they add that classic numbers, text, some fantastic sentiments. They just add those elements that are going to kind of keep your eye interested when you're looking at your journal pages. So this stamp and this stencil will be the Makers bundle. I'll probably use other Funky Fossil products, and you can find them all in my shop, and the link will be below this video. But they're the ones that I think might be useful stash builders for you if you want to have a play with these kind of ideas. What I will normally also gather together is some of my patterned papers. All three of these are actually from the Wild and Free 8x8 paper pad. This is where you kind of keep and can find uses for those offcuts and torn pieces, and it's totally a matter of personal choice as to how small pieces of paper you keep. I probably don't keep the smallest of scraps, because I would just be totally overwhelmed within a matter of a couple of weeks, but I do keep bigger pieces and then want to try and make sure I use them up on my collage pages. This is a great supply to have as well. This is rice paper. This is blank rice paper, A3 sheets. I get mine from Indigo Blue. I think it's a lovely quality. It's great for stamping onto, And the magical element of rice paper is, of course, you can stamp and you can stencil onto it, and then when you apply it into your collage, if you use a matte medium over the top of it, then that kind of, the rice paper itself almost dissolves into the background, so you're left just with the elements that you've put onto that paper. So it's a great one for adding layers without bulk, and also kind of giving you some really cool finishes that look like they're just melting into the to the background. So rice paper is a good one to go for. Obviously other people sell rice paper, but I do like the indigo blue one. I've also got in front of me here some book pages, and as you can see, I've applied some gesso to these very loosely, very lightly, and different levels of kind of thickness. So sometimes you want the text to be more or less visible depending on your finish, and I'm going to do some doodling and some further work on these book pages to make them more interesting to add to my collage. But I quite often, if I've got a lot of gesso out on my desk, I quite like to throw a bit down onto spare book pages, so I've got those ready to decorate. The benefit the gesso gives you on your book pages is that it is typically quite a porous and light paper. So the gesso will give you a little bit more tooth, so that if you want to stamp, stencil, do other techniques, use your water reactive powders, etc. onto them, use your acrylic paints, then that gesso will make it a bit more of a stable surface, and also won't drink the ink quite as much if you're going to go directly on with any inks to your pages. Of course, it also serves the added purpose of just knocking that text back a little bit, so you can see that it's a book page, but you're not necessarily too distracted by the words that are on there. Very useful if your book is from a dubious source and you're not sure what language is on there. I'm fairly confident in this one, but at least I know I've got gesso over the top. Another great supply to have, and for those of you that like gel plates and gel printing, I'm sure you'll have a whole ton of these. These are kind of gel prints that I've done. Some of them are just kind of fairly blank pools where I've just been cleaning the plate and taking a colour off. Some are where I've been playing. This was actually with some bubble wrap, which ended up with a really interesting look. With some string on my gel plate. Just trying to think, see what else is in here. I don't know. Oh, I used here. I've used fabulous kind of half-tone mountain onto the gel plate, so almost, I think that looks like a really fantastic kind of sci-fi landscape, doesn't it? So yeah, so I've got lots of pages here. Some of them haven't worked, and that is totally fine with your gel prints, because if you're going to use them in your collage and work over the top of them, then they're going to just add some texture and add some kind of colour and interest. So I've been playing with different stencils. It's an A4 gel plate, so a couple of stencils at a time on here. I'm sure I did it. Yep, so again, kind of a sundial stencil, a graffiti wall stencil. So I've got lots, lots here. Some of them just the roll-offs, you know, where you've been kind of rolling your brayer off to one side to kind of get rid of any excess paint. So depending how much of a hoarder you are, these can be great to keep, because again, you could then do some white stenciling over the top of this and still have something that will work well for your kind of collage backgrounds. So those are some of the things I would typically have alongside me when I'm starting to think about putting a collage together. A few other quick bits and tips just to share with you. Obviously, I've talked about gesso. I've got a massive bottle of it here. Liquitex. Again, there are lots of brands on the market, and it's about finding one that has the consistency that you like. The Liquitex gesso, white gesso, and I've also got the clear one, is quite a fluid consistency. So I like that because I don't really need to dilute it, and it goes on fairly thinly onto my base. But you can get thicker and heavier body gessos as well, which you can dilute if you wish them to be runnier, or use them at full strength. But I typically have the Liquitex with me. I've also got my matte medium. It's basically just a glue, but it will of course enable you to apply your papers and then layer on top, and it will also if you're kind of wanting to layer different mediums on top of each other, this will almost kind of create a barrier between. If you're not wanting things to really kind of mix together too much on your background, you're wanting to build layer on layer, then obviously having a layer of matte medium over the base will mean you can work on top of that and not disturb what you've already done. I hope that makes sense. But effectively also it's a great glue. It's quite a liquid one, that, so if you're going to be putting down heavier, more 3D embellishments, then you might want a more heavy body gel for that. But because I'm working in a journal, I'm unlikely to want to build that kind of dimension onto my page. Other kind of finishing bits and bobs that really kind of I think go-tos I use an awful lot. We often talk about washi tape and what to do with it. Washi is a great one for collage because again you've got that slight translucency, so you can see the layers you're building on top of. It's not adding a lot of bulk and dimension to your project, but it is adding texture. So I've got a crackle here, and I've got 2 washi tapes which we're going to be releasing this week actually, so I've given you a sneak peek of those. And if I use them on the page today, then you'll see those as the designs as they're rolled out. I typically also have with me mark making tools, so I love my Posca pens, black and white here, but I've got other colours as well in my stash, and you can see the various kind of different dimensions you can have. So when you're mark making, either on your finished collage background or to provide a pattern on your book pages, then these are acrylic paint markers, and the different kind of dimensions of the nib mean you've got lots of options on the kind of marks you might want to create. And what else have I got here on my desk? If you've watched me before, you may well have seen me use this because I'm a great fan of the Stabilo All Pencil. You can get it in a range of different colours. Obviously the black is kind of my most used, and this is it will work on all surfaces, but it's water reactive, so you can be adding shading and depth around a focal point, for example, and pull that colour out with water. But it's a great resource to have because it will work onto a collage surface even if you've got different mediums on it already. Having a few brushes to hand can always be helpful when you're putting your gesso and your matte medium on. I will probably stencil with acrylic paint today, just again because that will mean that won't move, whereas if I was stenciling with my Distress inks, then that might move if I try to put something on top of it. So when I'm using kind of acrylic paint with my stencils, I quite often use just makeup sponges to apply that rather than my blending brushes. Rub-ons can be like your washi tape, another great asset. This would be at the higher levels, the kind of the more finishing levels of your collage, where you might want to add some embellishments. Rub-ons will pretty much adhere to most dry surfaces, so as long as your collage is completely dry, your matte medium's dry, or whatever you've put down last, then these will actually go over a surprising number of surfaces, even uneven ones on occasion, so they can be a great finishing touch. What haven't I talked about? I mentioned matte medium as glue. Of course you don't need to put all your papers down with matte medium, so glue stick or wet glue can be also really cool ways of putting papers down quickly. Not everything needs to be absolutely sealed. And what else do I have around me here? So I've just really pulled together a stash that I would typically have to hand if I am, as I'm going to do this morning, if I'm going to get my kind of ideas together for some collage backgrounds. So obviously inks are going to help you with this. At this point I've got archival inks out. Again, I'm mindful that I might want then to put a matte medium or something over the top, so my archivals are permanent inks and aren't going to move, so they can be a safer option for stenciling and stamping on your collages. And if you're going to use them on the rice paper I talked about earlier, of course you can stamp with archival ink onto your rice paper, and then when you adhere that over the top of a surface with your matte medium, the ink, the stamp image isn't going to get blurry. That's going to stay put even if the rice paper kind of disappears into the background. Of course you can use, and I very Really, and without kind of my VersaFine Clairs or my Distress inks, is just being aware of the properties of the various inks you use and what else you might want to do. And I very rarely start with a finished end project in mind. And so sometimes I will use a medium on a layer and then realise that, oh, actually that's not going to be permanent. And that's the joy of doing something with collage. It's kind of a bit of problem solving, and okay, well, where do I go from here? What do I do next in relation to what I've already put down? And I think that's everything. I mean, there are loads and loads and loads of things you can use in your collages, and I'm sure I'll return to the subject in a future video. I'm not sure what I'm going to do today. Oh, I did mention acrylic paint. Of course, I've got some acrylic paint. This is Painter's Grey, not a super expensive brand. I have a range. I do have some Golden and Liquitex and Amsterdam, and but also, you know, I will buy paint wherever I feel I'm getting a good price and colour. And these Pebeo paints I think work really well on the gel plate too. So I do have a number of these. So I'm going to use some acrylic paint for my stenciling. And as I say, I don't really know what I'm going to do. In my head at the moment, I am thinking I might use, my focal point might be from our Poetry of Trees stamp set, but I can give no guarantees at this moment in time because I'm not entirely sure what I will do. All I know is the elements that I've gathered together are kind of going with a more earthy colourway and theme. So I've got my crackle paste, crackle tape. Obviously I've got these kind of neutrals which obviously we can build on and do something with, but these papers are probably the thing that are just influencing my ideas at the moment around colour palette. So I'm going to turn off the camera, gather my thoughts, and let's see how we can start to maybe create some collage materials for my book pages, rice paper, etc., and put that together into a finished page. So I shall see you in a second once I've tidied away and got some stuff out to actually start using. See you in a second. Right, I've been having to think about this. I've already taken quite a while just showing you even supplies that I like to use in my collage, so I'm thinking this will be an epically long video if I do all of this, these journal pages in real time. So what I'm going to do is I've got my supplies together. I'm going to do my stenciling and stamping and cutting and sticking. But I'm going to do that kind of speeded up, so I won't talk over the top of it. Hopefully what I'm doing will be fairly self-explanatory, but that will at least enable you to see the kind of project come together and the decisions that I make without me talking you through it bit by bit. All I have done since turning the cameras off is select 2 of my gel prints and cut them down to the size of my journal pages. So I think these will be the kind of the base layers for each side of this journal page. I did them both at the same time in the same jelly printing session, so I know I've got kind of colours that work across both sides. So although we've got a spiral in the middle, this will look hopefully relatively cohesive. So that's all I've done so far. I'm going to work on these outside of my journal just so I can do my stamping and stenciling without the kind of the unevenness of this journal behind the pages. And the only other thing I have done since I was talking to you last time is just pull out a few colours that I think are going to work well with the kind of the papers that I've got, because I think it's going to be a fairly muted colour scheme, and I think I'm going to go with the kind of the buffs and the greys, but I want to throw in a bit of green and a bit of ochre just to kind of lift it and make sure it just doesn't become too monotonous on the eye. So these are colours I think I will pull in at some point as I'm putting the layers together. And I think that's it really. So I will talk about whatever I come up with at the end, but I will just get to work on these base layers, my book pages, doing some stamping and stenciling, and let's just see where it ends up. So I hope this format works well, and as I say, we can speed up the making process, because All of these are techniques you're familiar with, and the joy of it is seeing them come together and hopefully create a journal spread in our book. So I shall keep the pace moving from here on in, and maybe pop in at the end just to talk through what I did. So see you in a sec. Okay, so we've done our stamping and stenciling and adding collage elements to our journal pages. Let's add the focal point. And I was going to stamp the tree image from Poetry of Trees onto some rice paper and put that on with matte medium. But when I was looking at the page that I'd created for the journal, I thought, well, in reality I've left a reasonable amount of fairly kind of neutral space in the middle there, so I'm not going to have anything that's going to compete too much with my stamped image. So I thought, let's just stamp it directly on. It's not in my journal, so I'm able to put the page into my stamping platform. So let's see how this turns out. I'm going to stamp it with VersaFine Onyx Black, because what I want, there's a lot going on around this image, so I do want it to be really strong, so that's why I'm using my stamping platform. I want to be able to get a solid black, but I am then going to heat emboss it with clear, because this ink doesn't necessarily dry so well on acrylic paint, which is what we've got here from the gel print. So I'll hopefully get a clear impression, but I won't necessarily, it will stay open for a lot longer. It probably will dry eventually, but I don't trust myself to leave it long enough. So we shall heat emboss just to seal that ink in. And because I've got this in my stamping platform, I'm not unduly concerned. I know I can go back and forward, hopefully, assuming this ink doesn't stick too much to the acrylic paint. And you can make sure that the stamp goes down in the same place. Let's see, so I'm giving this a good bit of time. I mean, obviously with this stamp, the main area that you want to be the most solid is that tree silhouette. You can see the page wants to come with a stamp. That's actually a nice image though, so I'm going to leave it with that. Let's get some embossing powder on it, because it'll stay open, as I've said already, for a little while. So clear heat embossing powder. I'm going with my superfine, but it's going to be clear. The image is going to be create a clear image, so it doesn't really matter too much if you have regular clear for this kind of effect. And I think pretty much everything else is dry on this page, so I shouldn't have embossing powder sticking where I don't want it. And this, hopefully, because it's quite a grungy background with a variety of kind of fairly muted colours, so I'm hoping by adding this clear heat embossing powder, this is going to give that focal image a really nice gloss and lift it from the background. I think that's done the trick, don't you? It's got a nice sheen to it. And it's standing proud of the background, mainly because more by luck than judgment I'd left enough clear space for that image to have contrast. So I'm not going to do the very final bits and pieces on camera. I'll probably do a little bit more fussing around with it, but this is how the two pages are now looking. And you saw me kind of sticking and deciding where to place my elements. I'm going to put the enjoy the process sentiment in the corner there, white on black, so again it pops. And I think that the kind of the key things just to kind of highlight with this is I've done most of the detail around the edges and then built in, Where I've done stenciling and added papers, I've tried to cluster that, so there is still variation between open space and fuller areas, and yeah, and also, so the other thing I say is, and the kind of the aim is to try and repeat motifs. So you saw me making marks on my gel printed paper, and then I've got that 3 times. My stenciling is repeated. There are circles here which kind of mirror the circles I put on the book paper. The little kind of half dots I've done with the stenciling mirror the mountains that are in the background there. So just trying to kind of keep your imagery relatively cohesive will help even when it's a busy page like this. I think all I'm going to do to finish it off, and obviously you'll see the final picture, is add a little bit of light and shade around our focal point, and probably add a little bit of splatter just to finish it all off. But beyond that, I think that's a lovely 2-page spread. Very simple bits of collage, but you saw how much fun you can have adding your own marks to collage papers and layering them over the top of a gel print. So I hope you'll be inspired to give that a go. Remember the A5 Musings set and the coded stencil which I used here are the Sunday Makers Bundle that are on offer this week. But thank you for watching. It's probably been a really long one, but thank you for staying to the end, and I hope you like these journal pages. I'll see you again next Sunday. Bye for now.